We're live.
So we are live now. Good afternoon, morning, evening, depending on where you are joining us, everybody. So you've joined my IRMS roundtable for maximizing the use of Microsoft Teams in regulated environments. And for those of you who are already familiar with what we do here, please, this is a roundtable. The audience doesn't just sit there and listen to us. We'd like to hear from you. And as we normally do, we normally start with you telling us, giving us a hello, telling us where you are and what the weather is like. So I'll start. I'm in Aberdeen, Scotland right now, and it's sunny, believe it or not. We've got sunshine and loads of wind right now. So we'd like to hear from you. Please send us a chat. Oh, thank you, Shona, in Edinburgh. Yep.
It's rainy in Missouri, sunny in Texas.
Cloudy in Manchester.
Bright and cold in Oxford. Proper windy somewhere. It's going too fast. I can't keep up.
Ooh. Okay, so as we start our hi everybody, as we start our event. Ooh, gosh, thank you everybody. What we'd want to do is let us introduce first our agenda. Let me share my window. Now, we have given everybody the ability to have their audio and video so you can participate. But when we have our speakers, even us who are currently in the roundtable will be removing our video and camera feed to make sure that we focus on whoever is presenting. So let me just quickly share so the stage is full right now. So I will, apologies guys, I will have to remove some stream. Sorry, Alistair, sorry, Jason, let me just remove some stream at the moment to make sure that, Rob, help. Hi.
I've invited John on stage.
Is he back? Yeah, John should have
He's got a pending invitation.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Okay.
Shall I, while you're doing that, shall I kick off and say a few words?
Yes, please do, because as of the moment, we are getting inundated.
Busy getting ready. Okay, so hi everyone. I am Ren Lemming, and I am the chair of the Information and Records Management Society. And a huge welcome and thank you all for joining from all around the world. A great big audience from all different parts of the globe. So here we are today. Microsoft Teams, and what a great platform that has been, hasn't it, throughout the pandemic, to enable us to communicate and to collaborate when suddenly we all had to rethink how we were working from home. And indeed, through its use, many organizations are indeed now embedding this strategically going forward as part of their core information management strategy, which is fantastic. Now, of course, like all technologies, for every great solution delivered, questions will always arise, and that is why we put together these forums, and today's is specifically around the governance, maximizing the use of Teams in terms of the information governance considerations around its use for communication and collaboration. And we're going to do that today in a couple of ways. First of all, today is part of our Microsoft Customer Advisory Board working group. So it's an opportunity where we're reaching out to you in the information and records management community to understand what you'd like to see in the continued evolution of governance within Teams, within the M365 suite, so that can be proposed to Microsoft to consider as part of their development strategy. At the same time, it's also a round table. So we've got all our great guest speakers so we can discuss the opportunities and your needs and challenges in teams. And in so doing, of course, we recognise there's a wealth of technology in content management and governance sphere that's there also to complement Microsoft Teams. So therefore, today specifically, there's a very big thank you to Objective Corporation, who are our partner in this event. Now, I've been working in enterprise content management since the mid-1990s and have known Objective for many years. So I therefore have worked with them over the years and know just how much they've been supporting the information and records management community and providing their suite of information governance solutions, indeed for more than 30 years, and have been working with thousands of customers worldwide in both government and regulated industries. So we look forward to hearing from Objective, and thank you again for partnering with us in this event. Then, of course, a very big welcome to all our speakers and contributors from around the world, our subject matter experts, those from the National Archives, from TNA, from NARA, from National Records Scotland, our colleagues from HMRC, from Barclays Bank, and of course from the USA. Thank you very much. Last but not least, our guests and colleagues from Microsoft in the States. So that's enough from me. Thank you very much again for joining, and let the show go on. Maria.
Yes, thank you, Ren. And hello again. It's Maria Lim from the IM Tech Chair from IRMS. And thank you for joining us. We have been overwhelmed by your reaction to this event, that we are now thinking that with the CAB working group, which the IRMS organizes, we probably need to open it to you guys as our community on a regular basis. You know, we're thinking of at some point once or twice a year, we will open it to the public so that we could hear from you directly, not just through our chats and threads. So this is something new. This is really great that we got the response from you as we did. Now, in terms of our running order, so we have Stuart Mayers from Objective who will kick us off on the discussion that we need to have with teams in the regulated environment. We all got thrown into it during the pandemic. I know when I was at my work in my other job, how a lot of our clients, some of you are in the audience right now, reach out to us to say, how can we just implement Teams? And then after it got implemented, we're all going, oh, did we think about governance? And we did quickly do that. So at that point, that wasn't a concern. Now we're all backtracking on that. So it became a challenge. Then we've got, so that's Stuart kicking us off. And we've got the viewpoint of the regulators. We've got NARA, we've got TNA, the National Archives, and we've got Scotland represented. Their viewpoint in that area where Teams has stepped into. And of course, we've got our SMEs and MVPs, not just on stage right now, because I know that one of our very close MVPs in this topic, Joanne Klein could be in the audience right now if she hasn't joined us yet. So our SMEs, we have Vivek from Infotection, we've got Rob Bath, we've got James Lappin. A lot of these guys help us a lot in the CAB working group. And then of course, we have the people who represent you as those who have experienced this. So we'd like to thank Catherine Galvin from HMRC, who would tell us about her experience in that. And we're so happy to welcome John Newcomb as well from Barclays. Because when we say regulated environment, we are not just talking about government. There are industry verticals who are highly regulated as well. If Barclays is such an example, that Barclays represent that industry vertical of the financial services, where there's a lot of regulatory things that they need to adhere to with all the enterprise systems that they have. And of course, we welcome Erica Telly from Microsoft, who has always been there supporting us. And also, you know, before joining Microsoft, Erica has been an MVP in information governance. She is very close to this topic. And that's the reason why I think we're so grateful for the traction we have with Microsoft right now. So that's me over, guys. let me hand you over to Stuart Mayers of Objective to kick us off with this discussion that we have. Stuart?
Thank you, Maria, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or whatever what time it is where I am right now. So I'm dialing in from Australia. I didn't get a chance to say where I'm from and what the weather was like. I drove here to the office to present. It's about 2:30 in the morning, and all I know it was dark. So I'm guessing it's not raining, it's not snowing, it's not super hot. It's just pretty average here. So first, I'd like to thank everyone and especially IRMS for inviting me here to present. We ran a similar session like this in Australia for the Southern Hemisphere and had a lot of participants. And it's obviously a real big topic of interest about what to do with Microsoft Teams. And so this isn't a product presentation. I just want to share with you lots of insights that I've found, especially in the last sort of 6 months as it's been very active and talking to people all around the world. So it'll be hopefully prompt you with some ideas, some new thoughts, some topics for discussion for the team to chew on when the round table happens. And let's get into it. Thank you. So I'll start off just quickly by introducing Objective. So for those of you who don't know, as Ren said, we're an Australian company. We've been around for more than 30 years, providing information governance solutions to regulated industries and government, including financial services. And our focus is all about the outcomes. And my role is as a customer value director aligns to that role, meaning it's not just about we're providing bibs and bobs and pieces of technology. It has to support the goals of the organization and the outputs. And that may be, is it serving the community? Is it providing better customer service? Is it the things that are actually helping our customers perform the way they need to and have fantastic outcomes? So lots of experience, especially in this space. We have lots of customers all around the world, a couple on the northern side, obviously, with the Scottish and Welsh governments. Australian Department of Defence is our biggest customer with more than 120,000 users. But we have a range of industries at all levels of government. And down the bottom row, you'll see a number of them in the regulated industries. And I think this is really interesting because I'm having more conversations, we have focused on government a lot, but more conversations with the regulated industry, especially banking, has sort of come into our space a lot more because they're getting the microscope on their activities and having to sort of follow the governance requirements that maybe many of you have been doing for years. We also, as a Microsoft partner, are very active long-term partner. We've recently produced some papers with them jointly called Better Together, and it's really about the two ecosystems. So Objective has our sort of flagship has been Objective VCM, which is an EDRMS, and often organisations will have document management capabilities and also requirements for just the M365 ecosystem, what's good for the user and what's good for the organization. And so I've been working extensively with Microsoft in a complementary manner, and it's been quite exciting. And I've had a chance to present with them here in Australia a few times, side by side, and it's nice to be on this call today at the CAB. So I'm going to start off with some marketing insights. Now, this sort of just sort of piggybacks on what I was just talking about. And one of the most common things is about what's good for the organization and what's good for the users. I mean, the organization, you're here because you're interested in governance, in the mandates, the things that you have to follow as an organization, whether it be securities or policies or privacy, or just even protecting your intellectual property for the long term. On the other hand, the users may not be thinking about that all the time. They just want to reduce the overheads, get things done, make it a nice experience, and find the easiest way to do that. And often that's reflected in different ecosystems and different applications. And Teams has sort of been a bit like that recently. I think it's been interesting. It's just like Microsoft have done a fantastic job. We sort of started this journey with Teams about 3 or 4 years ago, and you could see it starting to grow and become more popular. But to support the amazing amount of growth went from multiple million of users growing every month in the last couple of years has been fantastic. And it's just a great user experience, and people have really got to enjoy that. But then the governance has sort of been suffering a bit in that. And so trying to find that balance is really where I've been focused on in recent times. And as I've been talking to our different customers, we've been engaging in lots of different areas and talking about what their challenges are. And I just wanted to highlight some of the main ones as far as what feedback goes. And some of them, like losing teams content, meaning that I've had customers tell us they're worried that someone will spin up a team, do some work in there, share some information, and then shut it back down again. And the information managers don't know that the content exists or didn't govern it. You don't want information outside your organization that you don't have inside the organization. They're concerned, they want to make sure there's security and compliance and you're protecting privacy and the way you operate. You want to make sure that you're not duplicating content. This is a common one. And silos, meaning where is the information that we have to govern or we have to be aware of is, can I get access to it? Am I aware of it? Freedom of information and other legal requests, it could be subpoenas. How do I respond to things like that? How do you deal with content without context? So a big thing in records management is obviously having context, so you have a record of a business activity and all the things that might be related together, so you can manage that activity or that project or that item through its full life cycle. And Teams content often needs that context, which is a high priority. Another common challenge is about team structure. How do you standardize the use of Teams? How do you make it a common experience for others as opposed to letting people just choose the way they're going to roll it out? And on top of that, there's also the Teams use policy, just from a general, how do I use it and when should I use it and which application to use when, but also in a governed environment, there are also other considerations of what's putting into Team and how you keep that information there, or does it belong anywhere else for the longer life cycle? So what I'd like to do is start off with the first poll, and Maria will fire this up. And so the question is, what are your top 3 concerns for governance of content in Teams and Microsoft 365 generally? And I'll actually just go back to those top 8. So if you sort of press the poll button on the right-hand side, you'll be able to plug in your answers, and I'll have a look at that and let's see what comes out. Obviously, if there's something else that's not on the list that you think is a priority, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll get Maria to pick it up and the team, and that can be discussed as we go to the round table.
Yes, I could see it coming round up. The first one is being secure, compliant, and protecting privacy seems to be winning.
Yep, silos.
Information
I'm glad this is in real time. I wasn't sure how the poll was going to work, so it was
in real time. It's yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Interesting that the policy is down at the bottom, so that the policy makers on this call might have some comments about that later on, I'm sure. Okay, fantastic. Well, it looks like that's the key, the security, compliance, and protecting privacy, with silos and losing sort of teams coming in a close third. Okay, thank you for that. And there'll be a couple more polls as we go. And thanks for the participation. Feel free to ask questions, and Maria's going to be able to pick it up and be able to talk about these things in the round table coming up. So from our point of view, we all started with in 2019 or 2018, Teams had been rolling out. We saw customers starting to use it and adapt it. For us, it was the South Australian government who had a requirement, and so we sort of started on this journey before all the activities of the last 2 years has begun. But then organizations were totally disrupted, and IT were able to roll out Teams very quickly. And that's what I was saying, it was great. Microsoft did a fantastic job. It supported that growth. All information managers and IT were all able to lapse their security and their working from home restrictions, and everybody was able to sort of operate to the best of their abilities. But what I noticed in the last 6 months is really the organisation starting to find a rhythm and the appetite to well set for the future. What we missed out in the last 2 years is the planning, the organisation, the user guides, the policies, all the things that you would normally do when you run a change management program. And so I think that's been a real priority to say, how can I actually set this up for the future? And really, as I said, the purpose of this topic today is maximise the use of Teams. How do I actually get the most of Teams and collaborate and help our users actually work better at the same time? But on the other side, governance has begun. This is something we were sort of aware of and waiting for. And this came up on a call with Welsh Government the other day where they talked about, the UK and Scottish, basically inquiries have started to begin. And so therefore, the people who have to deal with these inquiries are concerned about information that may be out there in the field or in Teams or in people's computers and things like that, and how to respond to that. So I think there's sort of two things. One is using Teams better, but also making sure you're governed. And that's obviously what the poll has suggested as well. And that's really the opportunity that you have. The opportunity is, some people just use it for Teams and channels and chat. Some have their telephones now through Teams. I know we migrated from Skype to Teams a couple of years ago, and I don't even know what a desk phone is anymore. The next level up is a stage could be, I need to govern the content inside the Teams and the channels. You might want to leverage access to your IRMS. So if you do have a document management system or other applications, how you can use Teams as an interface or as a starting point is, instead of having to flip applications, use that. I'm looking at the Teams to access information. And the fourth option is actually maximising the use of Teams and improving your business activities. So I'd like to sort of put out there to another poll just to say, of those four options, if you'd like to select the poll, Maria, or post that again, where are you up to on your Teams journey?
So there's a second poll now that you could respond to, guys. Please feel free to respond. And let me see how you are voting. Only use Teams for communication and chat is winning.
Wow, that's a clear one, isn't it?
Yep, it's a very clear, like we're only using it for communications and chat.
Yep. And this will obviously come down to one of the policy discussions about, what communication and chat may be governed. So I'll sort of put a marker in that one, and we can bring that up in the conversation as well. So thank you for that. That's a real clear one.
That's a very clear winner. Yeah.
Yeah. The next poll piggybacks on that and says, well, where would you like to be at the calendar year? So I'm guessing you've joined this call to hear about Teams, to hear about governance, and to understand how you can maximise it. So it'd be really interesting just to see where you are compared to where you'd like to be. So poll number 3 has been posted.
Yep. And they want to maximize the use of Teams.
Yep. Excellent. So Microsoft will obviously be very happy to hear that.
Yes. Eric will be happy with the result of this one.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, they're always bringing out new features and functions and capabilities, and I think there's what I'm finding, there's a lot of things in there that people are still discovering. But I think it's interesting to see the governance of Teams is also coming in there a second.
Yep, very close second.
Yep.
And that
Okay.
is very good.
Thanks everyone for those polls. We'll have another one coming up a bit later as well. So just wanted to now share some of the customer insights, and they're sort of not in any particular order, but it's just the common flow of conversation that we've been having while we're talking to customers. And the first one is information is more than just a record. So if you're a records manager, you already know this, but it's not just about being compliant, because often information managers, that's all they do is just keep the records and that's it. And we all know it's a lot more than that. It's all about the protection of information from a legal point of view, whether you're having to deal with Freedom of Information Acts or whatever that you call it in your legislation, how you have to protect your IP, how you deal with subpoenas, how you protect yourself if some sort of lawsuit. So obviously keeping information about decisions and business activities is critical. Often there's a relationship with information that might be recent or even past. So it's not just about working in the now. A lot of users will just think about it's now, it's done, I don't care. But it's all about how you reference other information that might relate to other activities or even long term. I know government organisations have mandates to keep information for 20, 30, 50, 100 years or more. I think there's a 500-year one as well. And those things are very sort of critical. And that also supports the need to have information that you can trust. And that's why I was looking at how you surface information back to the users in a way that they can trust it. So if they're sharing information, if they're making a decision, it's really important. So having that complete story of a business activity or a project or an event or a decision or a program of work is quite key. Next one is content and context. And a lot of organizations will like to keep certain information together, so they aggregate the content around that business activity or that program or project. So the example here is the Jones case, where it might have information that comes from a CRM or a case management system. It might have the metadata. It might be another line of business application that sort of generates content. You might have content that's being generated out of SharePoint. You might have information that's related to correspondence or user-generated things such as Word and PowerPoints and Excel. Then Teams come along and added a new flavor to that. And the content and context enables you to actually put the Teams content in context with other information for the full life cycle. And one of the challenges I've heard a number of times is about SharePoint sites, where we've had either an IT or an information manager have said, I've got 500 SharePoint sites. I don't know what they are. How am I supposed to deal with them? The people who go on the SharePoints are cycled through. And so with Teams, I think you've got an opportunity, if you can give the teams context when you create the team, and then when you're looking back in time and think, what is this team? You actually understand how it relates to other business activities as opposed to being isolated by itself. So this is a common model in our customer base. Another common model is actually putting teams' information together. So how do I aggregate them based on a subject or a topic or a line of business or something like that? And so one of our councils in New Zealand extensively uses this with Tauranga City Council. They sort of focus on bringing the team's information together and aggregating that, and then having that connected to other information as required. And so it's a bit of a different model, but if you're sitting there thinking, oh, we had that collaboration about we set up the network infrastructure, where was it? You've got an easy point to access that and find it because it's in context with other information. The third one is access to content, and that's why we had that, to do with either access from IRMS or other applications. I mean, there are users who are using Teams as their starting point, and Tauranga actually do that themselves. The users, that's their start point, where Teams is their launch pad to everything else. So if you do need to launch from other applications, it's good to be able to surface content and information that might be generated by application inside Teams. So it saves time and effort. The users don't always have to flip between their applications. The next one's an interesting one. I'm not sure how you find it. I maybe should have had a poll question about this one, asking how it was in your organisation. It's really the relationship between IT and information managers. Sometimes information managers and records managers are part of IT. Other times, information managers might sort of roll up through a governance side of the universe, or could be in operations or something a bit different. But what I've really found is where these two are actually working together is where the best outcomes are. And specifically is because with Teams, if you look at what the policy is, and it might pertain to that, is that IT will say, we own the platform, and IM will say, well, we own the content. And that's a really balance. And IT have obviously rolled out the platform very quickly. We've had some customers who haven't rolled out Teams because information managers say, no, it's not governed. We're not going to let you. But more often than not, they have rolled out Teams. So I highly recommend that get the IT, if you're in IM or vice versa, get them involved very early, be on the same page. And when you go out and talk to the business, you present a united front. And I just find that resonates a lot better and have a lot of better outcomes when the two are working together.
Yeah. Stuart, we just have a quick question about the recording of the meetings, because it has become quite a part of, depending on how you're set up, the recordings, and of course the transcript as well of the meetings that we have in terms of content that is within Teams. How would you deal with it within the context of your previous discussion? I think Helen Findlay from the Scottish government is asking.
Yep. So the context. Say that again. The context of, or the information that's kept inside Teams.
The information that is kept inside Teams.
Yep. Yeah. So one of the policies, and I'll come to this in a slide shortly, is when to use chat and when to use post, and that's been a big one. Because conversations are moving out of email into Teams. And this is probably one of the most contentious policy discussions, so we'll put a pin in that one as well, because do I need to capture chat? And how do I find all the information in chat that's relevant? And I will answer that shortly, but governing the files and governing the conversations, and I think they're the main part inside Teams, is quite key. I'm not sure if that answers your question for now. But there's a couple of things I talk about that as we move on.
Okay, we could revisit that, Helen, as well.
Yeah, okay. This slide I sort of borrowed from a presentation I did with Microsoft, the me, the we, and the us, and it's really about when to use various components. And I'm finding this to be the common one. Probably OneDrive's the most contentious one. Is it? And the sort of recommendations, and I would sort of follow that, is OneDrive's great for personal information. You know, with emails and just general office use, where you're sort of working, you've got your productivity tools and working by yourself. As you start collaborating, you start using Microsoft Teams and other parts of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, and then SharePoint there for the organization, intranets, and sort of the broader community. But the key point here is that having that option to use Teams, I think it'd be interesting to see how OneDrive evolves. Some people use it, some keep away from it from a policy point of view. And so I'm interested to hear the conversation about that. But obviously, Teams allows you to consolidate all those things into one interface, and it's great for the organization and the users. Next one is just the different types of teams you have. And I think originally most organizations I see had started out with, well, either the bottom one, which is we just use it for chats and comms, but the top two is, you know, organizational teams, which is where you set up like a company team or a business unit team. It's just about disseminating and sharing information. So there's less collaboration and business activities in there. And the second one being a project or activity-based team, where you spin up a project or activity for that has a life cycle. I think this is where teams really sort of grew from. That, you know, you say we're going to work on this project together, or we got this business activity. I mean, we work with government, so we're always doing tender replies, and we can spin up a tender reply in a team, have a collaboration on that, then shut it down, but keep that information. But one of the more popular ones from a growth point of view is a departmental team, where a business unit has set up a team with a structure, and the team is perpetual, but the channels actually are the ones that have life cycle. So people tend to do a few different things with channels. You know, some people might say, I set up a channel, and then when I've left that department, someone else will, you know, set up another very similar channel. I think very key to understand the balance there. Typically, our customers that I've spoken to have all of the above. I've had people say, look, you know, we've rolled out Teams. It's just out and all gone wild. I've had one customer say it's gone feral. And so they've got no standardization and sort of no governance, and they're going to pull back some of their existing teams and start rolling out a controlled team with a department team, with the channels and having structure, and just makes it easier to navigate. So if you go to every project team, it's always going to have the same look and feel, the same tabs, the same channels available. It just makes it easier to navigate and access information. And this is the slide I was talking about earlier. This is another one, you know, Microsoft had I picked up at one of our sessions together, where if you're having chat, you have that conversation independently. But if you're doing something that's related to a business activity, it should be in the team or the channel. And so you'll notice that the naming convention, they do actually call it post now, which is sort of chat inside the team or channel. So recommend that as an option. So at least you've sort of got that delineation of what information belongs where. The other one is also down the bottom there. I've got meetings. I think this is a good option as well. If you've got Microsoft Online, you can actually invite the channel to a meeting, and that gives you other benefits. And so, for example, if I've created a meeting inside, invited the channel, then you've actually got a record in the post that the meeting existed, so other people can see a meeting was on, even though they may not have been there. If the meeting was recorded, you can actually keep that. That's depending on whether you choose to record meetings. That's another policy decision. If anybody's transferred files and documents, they're actually kept inside the post, but also be in the files tab inside team. And any sort of conversations inside the team has also be kept there as well. So one of the good things about that's from a consideration point of view is that instead of people using all these different tools to communicate and collaborate, you know, doing it inside team and holding a meeting inside a team allows you to put it in one location, which means that then you've got a better chance of governing and putting some mandates around it and some good policies to support that. And the last part, just maximising the use of team. I think this is the one that will grow. I'll probably have to reduce the size of the font, but cross-business unit collaboration has been probably the top of the list. I could have had a poll on this as well, where different organisations can collaborate together. So one of our customers said our different business units put all their security people together, and they ran some projects in a team, and then we'll be able to govern that information and keep it together. Cross agencies, or if you have sort of a more distributed organisation or even external collaboration on a business activity, Teams is often good for that. Although coming back to the poll question, security considerations are very much there. I've heard a few interesting stories about that. Maybe I'll talk about one of those when we have the round table as well. Accessing other applications, I think it's important. And some people will use Teams. I mean, as a Objective, we've got an IRMS. Some of you are users on the call. And so, if you're using Teams, I can access information that's generated by a line of business system or an EDMS from Teams. That's also a benefit. But it's also good the other way. If I'm using a line of business system, if I can access content that's being generated from Teams, it's really that I'm not having duplicate copies. I'm creating a single source of truth. Holding meetings, I talked about. OneNote is often where you're up to on your OneNote journey with the customers. Because if you haven't used OneNote, it's really a big bucket of small pieces of information or a big database. And so using a feature, you can actually email the channel, you can actually email a OneNote to give that context and put that inside the channel. And again, with email, some people have actually used email and emailing the channel means I've got a record of something that came in maybe from an external person. The last one there actually came from a conversation with Nature Scott in Scotland, was the fostering openness, and I think this is a good one. It actually, what they had was their researchers were normally communicate over email, but email is very personal, as we saw. It's the me, and when they went to Teams, other people were able to see what people were communicating about, and they collaborated a lot better. So they had visibility on conversations they would have never seen in email, and so I think that's a really interesting outcome. To sort of consider as a benefit for the user, just when it's able to be open and people can sort of participate without being siloed inside email. Another interesting use case came from one of our state government agencies who were having a royal commission, and their biggest concern was their information. Now, their information managers also had that same discovery. They're going, well, hang on, our documents, there's less documents going into our document management system, and there's less emails being captured. Where are they all going? And that's where they realized that a lot of the conversations were happening in Teams. So they were quickly able to deploy some governance options to just help themselves, because the executives at the time, royal commissions, everybody's a bit on edge, and everybody's aware of the information that you need to find. So the last part, I said, I'm a customer value director. It's all about building business cases and telling a story. Having that. If you've got a message of governance that you need to get to the management, how you tell that story is going to be key. And that's one of the roles I do here, is sort of giving it language that's going to resonate with the management and help your business case. In our world, we have a product that's Gov365, and it sort of focuses on that governance and in place of Teams and SharePoint, and specifically doing things with the life cycle, so the creation of teams and the end of a team. I think that's also a conversation you might have with how many people actually remove the teams, or delete one user teams or something like that. So managing the life cycle is quite key. Having access to other applications through Teams, but also keeping a record of that Teams activity. And that comes back to the context I was talking about earlier, meaning that if you look in the future, you say who was in that team and what information was there, and you should be able to find that and be able to govern that for whatever purpose going forward. From a benefit summary, I come back to the original slide at the beginning. It's good just to say, well, what is it for the organisation? You'll probably have your own list, and there's a number of other ones here that I haven't got. And you find that balance, that it's not just about hitting them with the governance stick. It's all about, well, there's a lot of benefits for the users in there as well. So is it governance? Is it how we're creating teams? Is it records compliance? Is it dealing with freedom of information or legal requests? Or is it security and privacy? Or for the users, what's in it for them, how they can get remote access or mobile access on different devices, how they participate with different people. And you'll notice there I've just got the archiving one with some financial symbols. And I think this is one of the things, if and the challenge is about the cost of governance, is that if you actually have to ask your users to pick up that information from Teams and select which information needed to be governed, and they had to pick up the files and put it into another application or another location or an archive, and then they had to grab the chats that was important, put that in a Word document or PDF. Now, the example here is if I've got 100 teams and I've got 20 SharePoint sites, and the time it takes me 5 minutes to check a team and go through that process of archiving the context, the content, and do that once a week. It's nearly it's about 1.5 full-time employees, and that's the time and effort in order to do that. And so when you're building the business case, there's that balance between here are the soft benefits, but often we look for what are the financial benefits and what are the time savings that you might be doing as an individual or an overhead, or things that, if you're not doing it, means that you may be putting your organization at risk or risk of compliance challenges. So that's it for my insight. I realise I probably covered a fair bit in that piece of time. I hope you found something of interest. If you're interested in a discovery session and sort of personalise this conversation, as you can see, it's 2:30, now 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm up at all hours. Happy to have a conversation at any time in the world. So just point your phone at the QR code and reach out to us. And you can contact us for any more information. Otherwise, just send me an email or ping me on LinkedIn, or obviously you can contact us through IRMS. But thank you. I hope you found something value. I'm sure it's going to prompt some questions by the panel that's going to come up, and feel free to put your questions in the chat. And from that, I'm actually going to start off, and it really just comes back to the policy. And I think this is what I found interesting, because what is the policy on records in teams? And even though there are, you might have government mandates that you have to follow, you might have your own security mandates, privacy mandates, what you do as an organization. I'm interested just to see what people do with teams and how they've controlled that policy, because often it's open to interpretation. I've talked about Nature Scott and Tauranga, my customers. They have 100% governance policy. I mean, Nature Scott says, we're happy because we can capture every information every few hours and we're not going to lose stuff. And that is quite key. But other organizations say, well, we'll leave it to the users. We'll leave it, we'll just provide some outlines or some guidelines and let them decide what information is important. And then obviously in different jurisdictions and different parts of the world, there's sort of different mandates that you might have to follow that might be different to what I do with commonly here in Australia and the UK. So I'll hand it over to the poll and hand it back to Maria. And thank you very much.
Hello, thank you so much, Stuart. And we've got the poll, and concerningly, what is winning is they don't have one. There is no policy of records in teams. And Pete is smiling right now. Would like to go there. Okay, so we're moving quickly. Let us go to our policymakers, and let us start with Nara. Very quickly, the policies around these teams that Nara has now started to develop. Beth and Kevin, I'll leave it to you, and then followed by Balint and then Pete Wadley.
Great. So my name is Kevin DeVorsey, and I'm an electronic records policy analyst at the National Archives, and I'm here with my colleague Beth Cron, and we're going to explain a little bit about the regulatory environment in the United States government. So first, a slide about who we are. And we're an independent federal agency, 2,400 employees. We have 40 locations, and that represents, we have a very kind of diverse portfolio of responsibilities. We have presidential libraries. We also have record centers, and then archives where the public can conduct research, $380 million budget. Beth and I both work in the Office of the Chief Records Officer. And so we're the organization within NARA that interacts directly with federal agencies. And we provide training, oversight, we develop policies and regulations, and we also help them with scheduling and appraisal of records. So the National Archives and Records Administration is a little unusual, and I think this is important for this audience. We're responsible for all of the records of the United States government. I know in the UK, there's a parliamentary archive. There's also TNA. In the United States, everything is going to come to us. And presidential records have been in the news quite a bit lately. And that's governed by its own legislation. We have an agreement with the United States Congress whereby we take care of the records, but they don't get accessioned into our holdings. And what Beth and I work on and what we're going to discuss today are federal records. So we can take a look. And so there is this separate legislation that governs federal records and presidential records. And within the federal records environment, one of the key differences is, this is very kind of sloppy and people will push back against it. But if you think of it, everything from the White House and the executive office of the president is intrinsically valuable. So it's all going to come to the National Archives at the end of the administration, whereby with federal records, it's the agency's responsibility to look at their business processes and make that determination, which are the records, things like a receipt for a trip, that they have some value, but you can dispose of them after a given period of time. And then what is that small subset, which are the really important records that need to come to the National Archives? You can go to the next slide. So, what is our goal in records management is we partner with agencies, and our goal is efficient, effective functioning of government. Don't waste money preserving things that don't need to be kept, and instead focus your efforts on those things that you need to preserve and transfer to the National Archives. And this overarching goal of document citizens' rights, hold the government accountable for its actions by making sure that those actions have been documented, and then also this kind of broader capture records relating to the national experience. So one thing, I think Stuart did a fantastic job of discussing content and context, and then also structure within a Teams environment. At the National Archives, we do not bring in systems. When I started, it was always, can we transfer our Oracle database to you? And the answer was no. We preserve records, and that is a complicated process when records are held in all of these different systems. There's about 250 different federal agencies. Some are very large with huge budgets. Some have wonderful records management departments who do a great job. There are also very small agencies or temporary commissions where their records management isn't baked into their DNA quite the same way. And so there's this process of working with them to make sure that the records that they have can be transferred to us. And so from the kind of regulatory framework that we have in place is hinged on this idea that we have the authority to tell agencies what we want and when we want them to transfer it to us. But we don't have the authority to tell them how to do it or why. We don't have the authority to say everybody's going to use this format or everybody's going to use this common platform. And so to get around that, we have these two kind of key pieces of policy that we have. And one is this one, NAR Bulletin 2014-04, which provides guidance to agencies over the kinds of file formats that we'll accept for permanent records. So it's broken down by content type, and hopefully in there agencies will see something that matches the kind of records that they have. I had read that there's something like 20,000 formats have been created through time, and it's impossible for us to preserve all of those, especially those ones that are proprietary or require a specific type of hardware or software to run. And so this guidance is kind of keyed towards open formats. And happily, Microsoft has gone the standards route with a lot of their Office automation formats. And so they are included there. And we're always trying to figure out what are agencies actually using with their permanent records. And the other key part of this, we realized it wasn't uncommon for us to receive a hard drive with, I'll call them content files, binary Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PDFs, TIFF images, whatever. But there was no accompanying index or metadata that our processing archivists could use to make sure that the National Archives could properly manage this stuff. And so we published NAR Bulletin 2015-04, which is a very minimal set of item level metadata, which should accompany transfers of records, basically in a spreadsheet as a CSV file. We based it on the Dublin Core. And I always say some are inherent while some are aspirational. And what I mean by that is, every file is going to have a file name. You can't create a file without a file name. At the time that we published this in 2015, we asked for relationships. And Stuart did a great job of explaining that those relationships that exist between things in a team environment. In the past, if an agency was using just a hard drive or a shared drive to save things, they didn't always have the ability to transfer that relationship information to us. And so we included this as something, look at this. And as you move forward and you work with your vendors and you're looking for new products, make sure that you're able to achieve these goals and pull out this metadata along with the content files so that you can transfer a meaningful package of information to the National Archives. And so now I'm going to turn things over to Beth, who will talk a little bit more specifically about how we interact with Microsoft Office 365 and the other suite of applications.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, exactly what you just said. So NARA, we don't provide platform-specific guidance. We are agnostic as to the tools that agencies use. We just have the Federal Records Act and our regulations that say that records must be managed. And so we have that position. However, we have upwards of about 98% of federal agencies that are using Microsoft 365. So we found it was necessary to bring a group together so that we can talk about specific records management concerns in Microsoft 365. So we have a user group. This is a group of over 500 people from upwards of 200 agencies. We get together for monthly meetings. We have a wiki where we can share resources and notes and presentations, etc. And then also we've engaged with Microsoft, and they come about 2 times a year to talk about roadmap updates and any new functionality that will be coming out in the enterprise version, or they're working now toward parity with the government versions releasing at the same time. So that's been really important for us as far as getting together with the user group and talking about concerns such as how to apply NARA's capstone policy in Microsoft Teams. And so we're able to have those kind of discussions. I've seen that question pop up in the chat about provisioning. We've heard from a number of agencies that it's their best practice to have a provisioning service that will have default retention and other requirements built into it. So we do have at NARA, we have the Universal Electronic Records Management requirements. These are based on policy, guidance, standards, including ISO 15489, to say at a high level what program systems need to be able to do to manage their records. And so this could be used to go down the list and see how all of these requirements would be met in Microsoft Teams. We also have a success criteria, and we have these for permanent records and for email as well. So these are the tools that we provide to agencies because we can't tell them exactly how to do it, but we want to be sure that the requirements are met. And so I will turn it back over to the next person.
Thank you, Beth, and Kevin. Thank you so much. Yep, there's still a lot of probably we have a next event so that we could deep dive into the capstone use of capstone in Teams. Handing over to Balan very quickly, and then Pete. Balan?
Yes, hi everyone.
National Archives.
Thanks, Maria. Do you hear me? Everybody hear me?
Yes, we can, Balan.
Okay,
let's just focus you in.
Great. And let me share my screen and present.
Yes, we could see your screen now, Balan.
Okay.
Just the presentation mode. Yeah.
Yes. So, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I am Balin Chole from the National Archives UK. So we are the official archive and publisher for UK government and England and Wales. I really wanted to use this opportunity to talk more about our engagement on record management, and just to give a bit of context on that. So the National Archives has the public role to provide guidance, coordination, and supervision to UK government departments and other bodies subject to the Public Record Act on the management of their records. So the Freedom of Information Act, in UK Section 46, Code of Practice, provides a high-level system and format agnostic guidance to authorities on keeping, management, and destruction of their records. So to provide support on system and technology-specific level, we are coordinating a range of user groups to engage government, KIM community, to exchange their knowledge, best practices, to meet with the expectation of Section 46. So the biggest user group that we are facilitating is Microsoft 365. So about 70% of organizations are using M365. So to offer best practice measurement tool for the community, we developed a maturity model framework that I want to talk a bit. So the idea was to create kind of a best practice statement. We worked on this with Rob Paff, actually IRMS Digital Director, on this panel as well. And to benchmark the framework, we asked our user group to rank the defined approaches and configuration as optimal, adequate, inadequate. So we asked this across areas of governance, provisioning, permissions, retention, and disposition review. So the feedback showed that overall there was a clear consensus on best practice. However, there are areas where there are no consensus on an optimal approach can be found. And just to give some examples, and maybe I just show two of these because of the time.
Yes.
So, for example, provisioning. Question, if you use Teams and or SharePoint sites, do you have a process that controls the creation of new sites? And as you can see, the optimal choice, the feedback of our user community, they say, A, we have a fully automated process which consistently creates and configures new Teams and SharePoint sites. There are further adequate approaches according the feedback. So they say that a semi-automated process or even a largely manual process which allows users to request the creation of new Teams and SharePoint sites are adequate approaches. So areas where improvement needed, if an organization provides stuff with pre-designed and configured structure of Teams where the end user is not able to request more sites. And another one on the other side, so if any user can freely create without any control new Teams or sites without any process or configuration. Let me show you one more, and maybe not provisioning, move to retention. So if you allow team channel post, what is your primary approach to managing records? So according our community, they say that to apply different retention policies to manage channel post according to the different types of team, that is an adequate approach. All the rest of it listed here. So automatically delete posts in Teams channels on a very regular basis and encourage staff to avoid including important valuable information within Teams channel post and ensure to record the conversation is manually created elsewhere, or even exporting Teams to a channel post to longer retention outside of Teams. These are all kind of inadequate solutions according their feedback. And we totally agree with the last one, which is an inadequate approach that we do not currently manage any of our posts in Teams channels as records. So the interesting point here that, as you see, there is no optimal solution. So that might indicate, well, it might indicate many things. It might indicate kind of lack of best practice, or maybe even lack of functionality. So we will analyze this and discuss with experts that why there is no optimal solution here. I will stop here. I know I'm one of the.
It's something that we will focus on at some future event as well, Balint, because it is a very good framework that Rob and the National Archives have been through. Pete,
there was a quick question. I'm ever so sorry. Just coming
yes.
back. What's the timetable for release of the framework?
So we can share the kind of questions and the statements, obviously not the answers, because that is data what we gathered from our community. If you are interested to get access to this framework, just get in touch, please. And we released it open government license, so it's reusable.
So right now it's already available, Balint.
Yes, but it's a first version, so the idea is to develop further based on feedback.
Yeah, so we will actually, there is further discussion that we will have to ensure that we help support the update and the continuous evergreening of this majority framework. Pete, moving on quickly to you before I bring our other people in. Yes, for Scotland.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'll be really brief. I can see we've got questions piling up. It's already got 4:30, so I'm just going to introduce myself. Say hi, I'm Pete Audley. I'm here representing the implementation team for the Public Records Act in Scotland. That is slightly different from my colleagues in NARA and the TMA, in much we have legislation by which public authorities in Scotland have to provide the government with a plan for how they are going to manage their records under the systems that they have in place. It's kind of a bedrock on which they can build their FOI practice and their data protection practice, and it's how you manage records in the first place. It's not particularly about managing records to archive in 20, 30, 40 years' time. It's about how you're managing things today, and our thinking obviously is if you manage it correctly today, it's going to be a lot easier to get it to archive down the line. Our real interest in this group is not specifically about Teams, it's about all the new apps that have been provided as part of the Microsoft 365 and the cloud package, that many of which you can create records on. Really interesting to say that some of the results in the poll and some of the things that Balint just spoke about how things that seem quite peripheral may not be properly considered as records. Public Records Scotland Act is very clear that everything is a record as long as it's information created by an authority, whether it's undertaking activities to carry out its functions of whatever type, on whatever format, in whatever medium, that's a public record as long as it's held in the system. So people who think, people who said they're using Teams for communication and chat, that chat's a public record as long as it exists, and we have an interest in it. We're really interested to see what effect Teams has got to have. Most public authorities that we deal with in Scotland work a hybrid system. They have records on shared drives. They have records in a filing cabinet behind Bill's desk. They've got records in the EDRM. They've got records in line of business systems like case management, patient records, all these sort of things are held on specialist systems. So they're quite used to having records in different places and managing them all. And maybe Teams is just another place that they're going to have a set of retention decisions. And it's not necessarily any sort of blocker, it's just a new part of a hybrid system. But the worry is, I think for us, that people don't know quite how Teams works. If somebody says, we have our records on Teams, what does that mean? Are they on Teams? Are they on Exchange? Are they on SharePoint? And we need our records managers to have the sort of control that they know what's being created. If you have your records in a paper format, in a filing cabinet behind Bill's desk, you know where Bill's desk is, you know where the cabinet is, and you know what type of records are there. In Teams, I feel it's a lot muddier than that. Records managers may not know what's being created. They may not really know what it means when something's created on Teams. Chat goes to Exchange, documents go to SharePoint. Is it duplication? How do you know what's there? So I think there's a lot of questions to ask for us about these records management plans. That I said right at the start, authorities have to provide a records management plan saying this is how we're going to manage our records. We have to ask now as the regulator, can you still manage, can you still do all this stuff if you're creating records on Teams? That's a really, really fast introduction to why I'm here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marie.
Yeah, very good point, very pragmatic point to raise. And now can I just quickly call Vivek Bath, James Lappin, and Rob Bath to maybe very quickly do a roundtable and start answering some of the questions that we have. Vivek?
Just a quick introduction, Maria.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay.
And maybe a question or two to answer.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Lovely to meet all of you again. So I'm part of InfoTection. My background is on information governance and protection. So being part of the consulting, implementing and advising customers on how best to implement governance into Teams and other Microsoft 365 capabilities. I think overall, I just picked up one question I was reading about Teams and various approaches to create teams or allow users to create teams or centrally provision teams. I think we've seen multiple flavors of those. Quite commonly these days, organizations are actually looking at having a more provisioning process, simple provisioning process whereby users can actually request a team, so more sort of self-service rather than creating a team themselves, is to request a team, and as part of that you also get an option to collect some information about the team, who they are, what the purpose is, which organization, etc. And through that process, then also the ability to apply some of the protection and governance controls as well. For example, external sharing, switching it off or on, providing labels, not only retention labels, but also labels to protect information or sensitive information, etc. I've seen also the other side. I think some examples people were sharing that let users create the team themselves without any workflow, but if they don't use it for a certain period, then delete it. I've seen that as well. I think one of the challenges comes with that is, if people have created information in there and you delete the team, then is often a bit of a challenge to delete the team, especially if there are files with retention, etc. So it certainly adds a little bit more to your disposition or the decommission workflow if you have just allowed people to create a team without any context.
Okay, thank you, Vivek. We would like to ask if you could continue to help us answer the questions. They are starting to pile up while I introduce Rob Bath very quickly. Rob.
Hi, everyone.
Yes.
I'm sure most of you probably know me already, but I'm IRMS Digital Director. I'm also a Microsoft 365 Solution Architect who specializes in retention and compliance. So hopefully I should be able to answer some of the questions that are here today. I think it's been fascinating so far from my perspective. There's been lots of different themes that I'd like to pick up on and sort of emphasize. Obviously, Vivek just mentioned provisioning is coming up time and time again. It is the best practice approach. You need to have some form of, well, before even provisioning, you need a policy. The fact that one of the polls suggested that many people don't have a policy around Teams governance and Teams usage, slightly shocking to me. Everyone needs to have at least a written policy put together around what is acceptable inside the context of Teams and how are you going to use it as an organization. Following on from that, if you are storing anything of value inside Teams, certainly, if that's part of your policy, then you need to start thinking about having a process for the creation of those teams to ensure that each team is created with contextual classification and ideally contextual retention applied to it as well, so that you've got less, let's say, classification and retention for users to have to wade through and tag things manually, and the ability for more of your content, therefore, to be appropriately classified almost by stealth. Now, the ideal is obviously that it's fully automated, but what I just said about a provisioning process, for a small organization, it could be a very manual sort of email request or, as Erica pointed out, a workflow-based process that spins up teams on a consistent basis. Then I think there's various other themes that were mentioned by Stuart right at the beginning. For example, how do you have that complete story around a team? How do you bring together all of the various streams of content, your chat, your posts, your files, and retain that context It's often harder than you might imagine, especially once you're considering about transfer to archive and the continued retention of that context, because all of these different elements of Teams are separately governed. You know, the chat is completely separately governed than, say, the documents. But I would urge the doing nothing approach doesn't work. So just allowing people to use Teams freely with no governance and no plan in place means that in 5 years' time, even in a year's time, you'll look back and you'll have very limited understanding of the value, the purpose, and the context, and of course the ownership of each team. I can see loads of questions flying in.
Yes, we're starting to fly up. And James, I'm so sorry about this one, but we're running out of time. Just a quick one, so we get Catherine and Erica into our frame. Yes. Questions are piling up. You are on mute, James. Okay, you are on mute still.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to speak, or do you want me to hand over to Catherine for her presentation?
Why don't we quickly hand over to Catherine, and then we have the word from Microsoft, Erica, he's been very, very busy with the question. Catherine, thank you, James. Let us hear from somebody who has gone through the pains of implementation, looking at the governance, looking at the platform and everything. Catherine from HMRC.
Hello, hi. Yeah, I mean, I've already just put a comment on it. I don't actually have a presentation as such, but I put a comment on what's jumping out at me is the need for, bringing the user along on the journey and demystifying the technology. I mean, it sounds really obvious, but, depending on the age of your workforce, some people are less confident with tools like this, particularly if they don't use social media or they don't use it very often. It's quite challenging. So, we're talking about lots of complex things here. Imagine if we've got to try and explain this to the users, Teams, chat versus channels. I mean, that's just one, a lot of people in our organization are probably a bit confused about that. So we've got a bit of a sprawl of chats versus channels. And if it's in a channel, yeah, that's better. But, how do you get through to the user when they just want to do something on the hoof? They just want to get this out, just want to get it done. So that's why I put that comment there. I thought that was, something that for me, I think it's really challenging for perhaps the senior management to kind of invest in that resource and that time to do that training, and have really good people within the IT who can also speak information, I would say.
Yeah, that's ideal.
Yeah, I think that's probably it for me. Thanks very much.
Do we still have John Newcomb from Barclays? I'm not so sure. Ren, do we still have John?
I think, unless John leaps in, I think he got tied up with something.
He got tied up with something. And of course, so with that, let us move quickly on with Erica. The key to a lot of these issues that we have been hearing, Erica. And thank you so much, Erica Telly from Microsoft. Here we go, guys. And we will try to answer all your questions. Erica?
Yeah, hi. So I've been trying to keep up with the questions in the chat just to provide some helpful links and things. So we do have like a recommended approach for records managers with Microsoft Teams. It involves using approval for the team. Like Laura Lowe just said in the chat, a request process allows you to make sure there is an actual need for the team, and it's not just a user training issue where, maybe another channel would be the best thing, but they just didn't know. And then you can also use Microsoft Teams templates that allow you to standardize what retention and protection policies are applied to the content in the team based on some of the answers they gave in the request process. And, there's a lot more to it. Auto expiration policies, others, it's way more than I can cover in a couple minutes here. I have a whole presentation on this that I'd be happy to give at a different IRMS session.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like me to cover?
Is there one or two questions that we can quickly answer for Microsoft in terms of, the clear, the first one probably, Erica, is the fact that you're very open to the community and the fee that we give Microsoft.
Absolutely.
And the second one would be if there's any, key question that you could answer at the moment before?
I mean, I think the key theme that's been jumping out at me from the chat is I don't want this to get out of control. I want to make sure we're managing records appropriately. What do I do? And when it was different when the pandemic started, right? We wanted to make sure people could do their work, and we spun things up as quickly as possible. But now we have an opportunity to go back and apply a bit more structure, governance, information architecture to our teams. If you're in a situation where the sprawl's already happened, no problem, it's not too late. You can retroactively apply these templates and other information architecture components to your teams, no problem. So I don't know if that helps at all, but there is a bit of work as a records manager to get some structure set up so that you can manage and govern teams appropriately. But it's something you could do out of the box, or our great partners such as Objective and others have provisioning solutions and governance solutions, because there's, almost every company in the world uses Teams now. So, there's going to be no one size fits all solution for everyone. So it's great that we have all these different options.
Thank you so much, Erica. And let me just quickly.
I was just going to ask a quick question, Maria. I'm not sure if I picked up on from earlier, and I'm not sure how much we covered it, but it's around if one has an audio and or video meeting in Teams and one wants to record that and save that as a record, whether there's any quick thoughts on that. I think there was a question.
Yes. Erica shared something on the chat, but Erica?
Yeah, so I put a link in the chat. I'll try to find it again.
Right, sorry.
Basically, you're able to auto-apply a retention label to a Teams meeting and only Teams meetings. So it's a query you put in there when you're configuring your label. It'll find all the recordings and apply the labels that you wish. And then together with what we call our adaptive policy scopes, you can also say if it's a meeting where this capstone official or this leader that we need longer retention policies on recorded the meeting, then apply this policy. Whereas if it's everybody else, delete after 1 month, because studies show no one accesses a meeting recording after a month, essentially, and they take up a lot of space. So recommendation would be to kind of divide out the meetings that you want as records versus the ones people are recording for convenience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. And James, would you like to quickly join me on stage just to we could discuss and encourage the James Lappin, the community. So there's a lot of questions. Vivek, Rob, and everybody's trying to help me out. But one of the things that is very apparent here is that there's still a lot of conversation that needs to happen. And thank you for the response. What we would like to encourage everybody to do is to continue the conversation. Do not stop just because this event has stopped. Reach out to us. Reach out to Microsoft directly. Reach out to your colleagues. Reach out to your policymakers. Reach out to the subject matter experts and MVPs that you have available for you. We are a community. We're here to help each other. And as IRMS as well, then that is something that we can do together. Always remember, those of you in the pandemic who has joined us from the very beginning, the CAB and the CAB working group started because of one post from Kate Watson, if I remember, at Dorset, the council. That's how we started. And there are more conversations that we can have. Just keep on talking to us. Let us just keep talking to each other. Please reach out to us. And let me show you, James, any last words before we move on to our,
I'm just excited about actually the question that Ren posed at the start, which is what would we like to see from a records management and governance, information governance perspective in Microsoft 365. My own thought is that I'd like to see a records retention model in Microsoft 365 that is so simple that even an organization without a records manager could implement it.
Ooh,
And
that'll be a deal.
yeah, and that's counterintuitive because obviously we want every organization to employ records managers. But my sense is that because Teams is so simple that any organization can roll it out without a records manager, and it has to be because non-regulated organizations don't employ records managers, by the by, they will all need a record retention model that's that simple. Mm-hmm. And because all of the complex records retention functionality that we as that need a records manager to configure takes a lot of time to configure and implement, we as regulated organizations need that simple model to buy us the time to be able to configure that functionality and to be able to use it properly. So that's what I'd like us, one of the things I'd like us to be thinking about as a CAB going forward this year.
Yep. So it's going to be on the list heading towards Erica and Roberto. So let me thank you so much as always, James. Let me just get our screen share, and Ren, let us say thank you to everyone. And please don't forget, if you're not a member of the IRMS, why not join us at the IRMS? Join the CAB working group and be part of this global discussion. It is a very global discussion. Watch out for our next events at irms.org.uk. Now, the CAB working group meets monthly at the last Wednesday of every month. Our next meeting is 30th of March. We're closing that to CAB working group members only. However, guys, reach out to us. If you want to be part of that conversation, please reach out to us so that you can take part in that CAB working group conversation. Thank you to Objective. Very brilliant presentation. Thank you to everyone who's given us. We have to say thank you to the Australian and New Zealand National Archives because they have provided us a list of their list that we could use for the CAB and the CAB working group as well. And then Ren, let us quickly talk.
Yep, absolutely. I think there's a next slide to show. Yes. And I echo what Maria said. Please do join the society if you're not a member. It's very affordable. Please join our community and help us with all these conversations that we're having. We have about the profession and we have about the tools within the profession that we use. And that journey, for example, we're so fantastically on. And thank you again to Microsoft. You can also, if you're a member, get discounted rates to our annual conference being held again this May in person in Glasgow. And we will have Erica and Roberto from Microsoft joining us there. And we're going to be doing a lot more content and conversations around M365, including Teams at that conference. So my huge thanks to everyone. My thanks to all of you in the audience for joining us. This is all fantastic information that we're gathering as well to feed into the process.
Yes. So what I was going to say to everybody is, after this event, you will receive an automated email with a link to the video. So you have access to the video. So everybody who has registered will have access to the video. Rob is helping us work out so that we could upload it as well to our YouTube channel. That's going there. And this is a massive conversation. So all of the questions, the chat that you have, we are organizing it together so we could plan the next events that we organize for you, so we could focus in on very specific things around the discussions that we have today, because it's very obvious that this is an area of concern for everyone. I have 107 chats right now and 5 questions. Thank you, Vivek Bhatt of Infotection, Rob Bhatt of Intelligy, James Lappin, Erica Telly of Microsoft, Catherine.
And a huge thank you again to Objective Corporation.
HMRC, and
yes, more events with Objective as well,
yep.
Because this is the Information Technology Group.
Yes,
more
that
broadly.
is
So watch out for those, and thanks again to Objective, whose contact details are also widely available throughout this.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. It was good.
Pleasure. Thank you,
Stuart. Thank you to Nara, all the way from the US, to Valid, the National Archives, and Pete as well, and all the others, and all the CAB working group members who I know are on the chat as well and trying to discuss all of these. Guys, reach out to us, please. Here's some of our email. My one is imtech@irms.org.uk. Please keep the conversation going. That's how we get all of these things achieved. Before, we were just, as a community, we were just moaning about it. Now, here is Microsoft with us through Erica, trying to help us. And we have our regulators as well, helping provide us those guardrails into all of these conversations. It is an amazing community because of all of you guys and everybody on the round table. Thank you so much. Ren?
Keep safe and well all, and have a great evening or day, depending where you are in the world.
Have a great day. Have a
Bye,
great
everyone.
day. Bye.